Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, September 2nd, 2022. Labor Day. Throughout history, employers have wanted to make as much profit as they can, and employees have wanted to earn as much income as they can. Now, it's just natural that each side would have its particular point of view, but successful employers and successful employees know that they have to work together and compromise. If the employer doesn't pay enough, good employees will not stay and the company won't have the workforce it needs to conduct its business. If the employees demand too much, the employer may not be able to stay in business, and they both lose. The United States started out as an agrarian economy. In 1820, 79% of the labor force was employed in agriculture. In just 40 years, that percentage dropped to 53%. In that same time frame, the percentage of the labor force employed in manufacturing rose from 3% to 14%. One of the reasons was a dramatic increase in agricultural productivity. In 1800, it took 56 worker hours to produce an acre of wheat. In 1970, it took just 3. And in that same time frame, yield per acre more than doubled, from 15 to 31. As more and more people became employed in non-farming jobs, the disparity in bargaining power became evident. This led to the rise of labor unions and union membership. According to USA Facts, in 2020, 14.3 million people, or 10.8% of U.S. employees, were union members. That's down from 20.1% in 1983. In 2000, 20.1% of the 19.2 million people employed in production, transportation, and material moving occupations were unionized. While private sector union membership fell from 9% in 2000 to 6.2% in 2019, it edged up slightly to 6.3% in 2020. Similarly, public sector union membership dropped from 36.9% in 2000 to 33.6% in 2019, and then rose to 34.8% in 2020. 7 states account for over half the country's 14.3 million union members: California, New York, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and New Jersey. Now let's look at taxing labor. One of the self-evident truths in life is that if you want more of something, you reward it, and if you want less of something, you punish it. That's why parents often reward good report cards with money or another type of benefit like a new bicycle or use of the family car. Unfortunately, the politicians and their minions don't seem to understand this basic truth. They don't understand that taking money through taxes is a punishment, and instead of rewarding labor, the politicians and their minions in Congress tax it. Abraham Lincoln, himself a laborer for many years, said, "Labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration." The higher consideration given to labor by the ruling class and their minions in Congress is to see that labor pays increasingly higher taxes and now is going to be in the group most likely to be audited thanks to the expanded IRS. Let's look at the regressive payroll taxes and income taxes on labor. The federal payroll taxes that fund Social Security and Medicare are the most regressive taxes imposed on American workers. These taxes start at the first dollar a worker earns and continue until the worker earns $147,000. Doesn't matter how many children you have or how much or how little money you make, if you can cloud a mirror with your breath and you're working, you pay the tax. Now, in theory, the 15.3% payroll tax is borne equally between the employee and the employer at 7.65% each. However, many economists believe that if employers didn't have to pay their 7.65% share, that money would go to the employees in the form of higher wages. Consequently, it's really the employee who pays most, if not all, of this tax. Now, it's an economic fact of life that when companies experience an increase in net income, wages go up. When income goes down, wages either stagnate or even actually decrease. And when companies have to pay more taxes, net income goes down accordingly. And then you have the income tax. Now, obviously, an income tax is levied against the money that people receive in exchange for their labor. Since very few people have inherited large amounts of money, most people get the money they need to live through their labor. Hiding taxes on labor by taxing corporations. Well, a third way to tax labor is not so obvious. Many politicians grandly proclaim that they're going to tax the rich, evil corporations, and by doing so, they're reducing the tax burden on individual workers. Well, unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. A corporation is nothing more than a legal entity. It exists only on paper. It can be either privately or publicly owned, but in either case, the owners are people. In the case of a publicly owned corporation, people buy an ownership interest in the corporation by purchasing the company's stock. In any case, the money that a corporation makes actually belongs to its owners. Now, most of the politicians and their minions advocating for higher taxes on corporations have never had a job in the private sector. Well, other maybe than babysitting or mowing lawns when they were young. They just don't understand how business works. So they assume that somehow the corporations are bottomless pits of cash that they can just help themselves to at will. They look at the corporations the same way they look at the federal government. If you need money, just create it. Now, the actual economic truth is that corporations can't just create money to pay the higher taxes. When taxes go up, corporations must either increase the prices of their products, absorb the cost of the tax by reducing their profits. Now, this reduces the value of the corporation, which is based on its profitability. And when profits go down, the company's stock is less valuable, and that's directly reflected in a decrease in the value of workers' retirement accounts. When taxes go up, corporations can also reduce the amount paid for labor, either by laying people off, not hiring people, or not providing further wage increases. It can further reduce other costs like rent, shipping, and the like, which are normally already as low as they can go, or of course they can do a combination of the above. When corporations increase prices or reduce their profit and see their stock value decline, or if they lay people off, the politicians and their minions attack the corporate leaders for being greedy, uncaring, and somehow un-American. It's like punishing a puppy for yelping after you've stepped on its paw. They simply can't understand a basic economic truth, that one way or another, individuals pay every penny of a corporate tax. So how much do these disguised taxes cost American workers? Well, that's very hard to calculate, and that's why the politicians and their minions love it. Now let's look at labor and the fair tax. Now, by taking money we have earned, all taxes reduce our ability to consume. However, if you want to encourage labor, then it's time to stop taxing it. Now, pay raises are nice and in this inflationary climate really needed. But if you really want more labor, reward it by stopping the taxation of labor and work. The fair tax taxes your consumption, not your labor. The more money you make, the more you keep. With the fair tax, you pay taxes only when you make retail purchases of new goods and services. And the fair tax prebate ensures that no one pays taxes on their basic necessities. The politicians and their minions seem to care little for the people they say they're trying to help, the laborer. For example, the politicians and their minions ignore the effect of their policies on a family of 4 making $30,000. Now, that family might not pay any income tax, but they lose 7.65% of their earnings to federal payroll taxes, reducing the amount they have available to spend on basic necessities from $30,000 to $27,705. Under the fair tax, that family would have the entire $30,000 to spend, and the monthly fair tax prebate would let them spend all $30,000 tax-free. The fair tax would result in them having $2,295 more to spend, nearly an 8% raise. Then, Factor in that prices will likely go down by at least 10%, and that family can now purchase $33,000 worth of goods for $30,000. This means that under the fair tax, this family that relies on its labor to live is effectively $5,295 a year better off. And by not taxing used items, the fair tax gives this family a way to reduce their taxes even further, thereby making even some of their monthly fair tax prebate available for consumption. In conclusion, if the politicians really wanted to reward us, they should immediately stop punishing those of us who work for a living and depend on our labor to survive. As columnist George Will said, money is time made tangible, the time invested in the earning of it. Taxation is the confiscation of the earner's time, and although some taxation is necessary, all taxation diminishes freedom. Celebrate Labor Day, but also realize that no matter what the politicians and their minions in D.C. may say, you can see their true colors in what they do. The fact that they keep the income payroll tax system in place and use it to punish those of us who rely on the fruits of our labor to live tells us all we need to know about what they truly think of us little people who are outside of their favored circle. So, what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives demanding that if the government really wanted to eliminate the burden of filing income tax returns, they should enact the fair tax and do away with tax returns altogether. The great 18th century Irish statesman Edmund Burke made a statement that applies in many ways. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. Take back control. Help us pass the fair tax. The IRS will be gone and will pay our taxes when we make purchases. We, not the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay. And we'll know how much tax we're really paying because taxes will no longer be hidden from us. They'll be clearly shown on every retail receipt. If you have friends who don't know about the fair tax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.